Hey, this is Pastor Bunjee Garrett, and I want to take some time today to present you with another word of encouragement. Well, it's the 23rd day of Black History Month, and so I wanted to take this opportunity to consider the Black History program that NBC aired back on February the 4th. This special program was titled Black Men in America, Road to 2024. Now, in case you missed it, this show was actually billed as being an exploration of what it means to be a black man in America during this time when our nation is deeply divided. With that being the case, NBC decided to give Tremaine Lee and Charles Coleman Jr. a platform, in order to remind black men here in America that they needed to step up and vote Democrat this November. Now, I have to ask you, did this show feature the ideas of conservative black men here in America? Like Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas or U.S. Senator Tim Scott, or how about scholar Thomas Sowell? Well, no, this program didn't feature those guys. Instead, it featured guys like Reverend Al Sharpton, who's been fighting the power for more than 60 years, and his protege, Ben Crump, who's also known as Black America's Attorney General. And last but not least, they also featured Benny the Butcher, and not the butcher working down at the deli of your grocery store. No, Benny the Butcher is a rapper who claims to belong to the new mafia as he uses his lyrics to glorify gang violence and guns and drugs and these sorts of things. Well, within 5 minutes of this show, these five men stood around a pool table as they began to take issue with, the black men who are out there now promoting President Trump. You might not know this, but a recent Gallup poll, well, it helps us to see that black voters are currently deserting the Democrat Party in droves and in numbers that will most certainly affect President Biden's second term. As a matter of fact, this Gallup survey that I'm referring to, it helps us to see that when it comes to black Americans, the Democrat lead over Republicans has dropped by almost 20% over the past 3 years. And if you're wondering, well, what happened over the past 3 years to cause this sort of political shift? Well, look no further than Biden's policies, which have resulted in an ever-increasing cost of living. This includes food costs that are up by 21%, rent costs, which are up by 19%, and utility costs, which are up by 29%. Now, in light of all these things, it's no wonder that NBC decided that it's time to address this issue by presenting this propaganda piece as they treat black American men like a voter bloc that must be captured and then kept on their political plantation. And those who dare to think for themselves, well, they're quickly labeled Uncle Toms. This was precisely the point that Larry Elder was making back in his 2020 documentary, which was titled Uncle Tom. This compelling documentary, it draws our attention to the conflicts that many black conservatives experience whenever black Democrats discover that their kinfolk are now voting for Republicans. And according to the testimony of those black conservatives on this documentary, well, they've been called everything from house Negroes to coons to black white supremacists and yes, of course, Uncle Toms. This was precisely the point that President Biden made back in May of 2020. It was actually on the campaign trail when Biden appeared on the syndicated program, The Breakfast Club. And it was during that show when he declared this, and I quote, "If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black." That's right. That's what Biden said on the campaign trail. And that's the political perspective of the Democrat Party. Listen, if you go vote for the party of Lincoln, then you ain't black. If you go vote for the party that fought to end slavery, well, then you ain't black. If you vote for the party that passed the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments, well, then it's time for you to return to the political plantation that promised a New Deal while simultaneously creating the Jim Crow laws that have had a lasting effect on the black community here in America. Well, now that many in the black community are beginning to consider the benefits of conservative politics, the Democrat propaganda machine, better known as the mainstream media, well, they've decided that they need to prepare the way for a Biden victory by bringing black men back into the Democrat fold. And with this as the goal, I want to consider their plan for solving the systemic racism that the Democrat Party actually created. Here's how civil rights attorney Ben Crump explained it during this program, and I quote him here. He said, "We can get rid of all the crime in America overnight, just like that." And people ask, how, Attorney Crump? Change the definition of crime. That's right, that's his solution. Just change the definition of crime. Now listen, if we just stopped calling crime crime and we instead started calling it not crime, this would most certainly bring the crime rate down to zero. This would bring the crime rate down to zero crimes overnight. This guy really gets it now, doesn't it? Crump went on to insist, and I quote here, "They made the laws to criminalize our culture, black culture." Who did? Who made these laws? Who made the laws that criminalized black culture? Well, the Southern Democrats did, because it was the Southern Democrats who created all of the Jim Crow laws after the Republican Party passed the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments. And so why isn't it the solution then to just stop voting for the party that made the laws to criminalize black culture? Well, the reason why is because this would go against the narrative of that same party. Let's consider how legal scholar and black conservative Dr. Carol Swain explained it after watching this political propaganda piece. She referred to Crump's solution as, and I quote here, "problematic and ludicrous." Dr. Swain went on to explain her perspective by asking, and I quote her here, "Are we going to redefine murder? Are we going to redefine rape? No, we don't want to go down that path." That's right, redefining crime as not crime is not a solution at all. Dr. Swain went on to explain it in this way, and I quote her again, "We need laws to be obeyed, and we need a public that's informed. And under no circumstances should we redefine crime so that it isn't crime." Sadly, there are black leaders like Crump and Sharpton who are creating more hostility between black youth and law enforcement by leading them to believe that they should just have the right to commit these sorts of crimes. According to the 2022 data from the FBI, black individuals committed 46.8% of violent crimes and 36% of drug crimes here in the U.S., and this is despite the fact that they only account for less than 15% of our population. With that being the case, the media would do well to stop featuring black leftists who want to just redefine crime. And instead, we need to focus on the black conservatives like Justice Clarence Thomas, who is an incredible example of true black leadership here in America. Sadly, the mainstream media would rather feature people like John Oliver, the so-called comedian, who actually spent time on his show this past Sunday offering Justice Thomas a bribe if he would simply step down from the Supreme Court. Now, before you dismiss this as just a stunt, I want to consider how Oliver put it during that program as he presented a legal contract that guaranteed Justice Thomas $1 million a year for the rest of his life for simply stepping down from the Supreme Court. And after presenting this contract, Oliver went on to declare, and I quote him here, "This is not a joke." He said, "This is real, $1 million a year until you or I die." Well, then, in order to sweeten the pot, Oliver then promised to throw in a $2.4 million motor coach, and he summed it up in this way, and I quote him again, $1 million a year and a brand new condo on wheels, and all you have to do in return is sign the contract and get the F off the Supreme Court. That's right, a rich white man is offering to buy a black conservative so that he can control him, and not one civil rights activist said boo about it. Listen, the reason why they don't want to say anything about this is because the Democrat Party won't allow black men to embrace the conservative values that actually ended slavery here in America. And listen, as our nation prepares to head to the polls this November, we ought to take a moment to ask, why would we continue voting for a party that actually implemented the poll tax to stop black voters from voting? Why not look to the political policies of conservative leaders who want to protect our national borders against those who are currently importing a new slave class into America? And more importantly, why not look for Christian conservatives to lead our nation according to the Constitution, which guarantees our God-given rights? Christian, listen, the race of our leaders shouldn't really matter. The race of our leaders really shouldn't matter. No, instead, we need leaders who understand that our rights are not given by government, but rather they're given by God, and it's the government's responsibility to protect our God-given rights. And to this end, I encourage you, let's look for conservative Christian leaders who will use the force of the law in a godly way, which is to protect our God-given rights according to the promises that the King of Kings has given to us by trusting in him. Listen, the psalmist put it best in the 33rd Psalm. There he declares, Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And would it be to God that our nation would return to the kingship of Jesus Christ? With this as the goal, I encourage you, let's prayerfully ask the Lord to provide us with godly leaders who actually bow a knee before Jesus. In this way, our nation will be blessed as we return to the Lord. And in this way, he will help our nation to become a godly nation that is able to fight the good fight of faith, and all for the glory of God.